The manager told her to leave because her presence made customers uncomfortable, but instead of fighting back, Jasmine Crockett quietly did something no one saw coming. Jasmine Crockett didn't need much, just a quiet corner of sweet tea, and maybe something warm off the grill. She had been driving for nearly 4 hours, zigzagging between small-town meetings, shaking hands, listening to people's stories, half of whom didn't even vote for her, and the other half only recognized her from a single fiery clip they saw online. It was a Wednesday afternoon in Sulphur Springs, Texas. The sky was flat and heavy with late summer heat. The driver had offered to swing through a chain spot off the highway, but Jasmine said no. She wanted something local, real, the kind of place where the cornbread was baked in cast iron and the waitress called you honey, whether she meant it or not. They pulled up outside a place called Norma's Table, a squat building with a faded sign and a front porch that sagged a little in the middle. It looked like it had been there since the 70s. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and where strangers always got a second glance inside. It smelled like fried okra and lemon meringue. A couple of older men sat near the window arguing over college football. A woman in scrubs was paying her bill at the counter. Jasmine took off her sunglasses and walked in with a warm smile. No entourage, no fanfare, just a woman grabbing lunch. She chose a booth near the back, away from the chatter, and pulled out her phone to answer emails. The waitress, maybe 19 or 20 with tired eyes and bitten nails, came over with a notepad. What can I get you to drink? Sweet tea, if it's fresh, and maybe the chicken fried steak. The girl wrote it down, gave a quick smile, and left without much else. Jasmine appreciated that no one asked for a selfie, no one whispered, just peace, at least for the first few minutes. It started with a pair of whispers from the counter, then the waitress walked past twice, without making eye contact. When Jasmine looked up again, she caught the gaze of a man standing behind the register. He wasn't dressed like the rest. Pressed shirt, no apron, middle-aged, pale, narrow stare. He came around the counter, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't need you, Congresswoman Crockett. Jasmine looked up, setting her phone down. That's me. He didn't smile. Mind if I speak with you for a moment? Sure. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, just enough to keep the conversation awkward for the rest of the diners. I think you should leave. She blinked, not because she was shocked, but because she wanted to give him space to clarify. Excuse me. You're not welcome here. I run a family business, and I don't like what you stand for. A few of my customers already said they're uncomfortable with you here. Jasmine stayed still. I'm just having lunch, and I'm just asking you to go before things get tense. She looked around. Some patrons avoided her eyes. A few were listening openly, now phones half out, pretending not to film. The waitress stood frozen by the soda machine, eyes wide. Sir, Jasmine said calmly, I haven't raised my voice. I haven't said a word about politics. I haven't done anything except order food. You being here is enough. The room was too quiet. The football talk had stopped. The clink of forks and knives had stopped. Only the hum of the ceiling fan filled the air. Jasmine could have raised her voice. She could have started quoting laws, bringing up discrimination. She could have made a scene, and part of her knew it would have been justified. But that's not how she wanted to play it. Instead, she took a breath, slowly reached into her handbag, not for keys, not for her wallet, for her phone. She tapped. Record high, she said, looking directly into the lens. My name is Jasmine Crockett. I'm a congresswoman. I just came in to have lunch at this local diner, Norma's Table, here in Sulphur Springs. I was told by the manager that I need to leave, not because I did anything wrong, not because I was loud or disrespectful, but because of who I am. Her voice was calm, no bitterness, no panic, just facts. Behind her, the manager shifted uncomfortably. And if you are wondering if I caused a scene, I didn't. I ordered sweet tea and chicken fried steak, that's all. And this is the America I'm in today. She ended the recording, slid the phone back into her bag. Then she looked at the manager. You sure that's how you want to leave it? He didn't respond, just turned and walked back to the counter, muttering something Jasmine couldn't hear. She stood, not because she had to, but because she was done. But what happened next caught everyone by surprise. Jasmine didn't storm out. She didn't even flinch. She adjusted her blazer, grabbed her purse, and stepped away from the booth, but not toward the exit. Instead, she walked 2 steps closer to the counter, where the manager had gone to hide behind his register. A few heads turned. Phones were out now, not blatantly, just enough to catch whatever might come next. Sir, she said, her voice calm but direct, if I'm leaving your place, I'd like you to say it again, plain and clear, right here, right now. The man looked up, startled. He hadn't expected her to follow him. His face turned a shade redder. I already said it, I know, but I'd like you to repeat it, because I don't want there to be confusion later about what this moment really was. He hesitated, then crossed his arms like he needed to defend something invisible. You were asked to leave because this is a private business, and I don't support people like you coming in here and making folks uncomfortable. People like me. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. You know what I mean? You push division, you stir up trouble, you bring chaos. The room was still except for a man near the window who quietly folded his newspaper and muttered, "Jesus Christ." Jasmine held her ground. "I came in here to eat. I didn't ask anyone what they believed. I didn't wear a campaign pin. I didn't bring cameras, but you made a decision. You told me I don't belong. You told me your customers are scared because I walked in." Her voice never wavered. It wasn't a performance. It was lived and tired, maybe, but strong. "I don't think they're scared. I think you are." That stung. The man shifted his stance, jaw twitching behind the counter. The young waitress, who had taken Jasmine's order, stood frozen. Her eyes didn't leave Jasmine. Her fingers fidgeted with her apron like she didn't know what to do with her hands. "I've got nothing to be scared of," he mumbled. "Then you should have let me eat in peace." There was a beat of silence. No one moved, no one blinked. Then Jasmine took a step back, looking around the room. She wasn't grandstanding, she wasn't preaching, she was just speaking as if she were talking to her own aunt at a kitchen table. "I've walked through courtrooms and protests and Senate hearings. I've been screamed at on camera. I've been misquoted, threatened, called every name you can think of. But you know what still shocks me? Moments like this, quiet moments, small ones, the ones that don't make the news, where the only thing I've done is sit down, breathe, and be seen, and somehow that's enough to get me kicked out of a restaurant in 2025. She gave one last look to the room. Some people looked down, some nodded, just barely. And then she turned, no fanfare, no final word, and walked toward the door. But as she reached the exit, a voice broke the silence. "I'm sorry." Jasmine paused, turned around. It was the waitress. She stepped out from behind the counter. Cheeks flushed pink, her hands trembled just a little. I didn't know." He was going to say that. "I swear I didn't." Jasmine gave a soft smile. "You didn't do anything wrong, but I served you," the girl said, voice cracking slightly. "And I didn't say anything. I should have said something. You just did." The manager scoffed, muttering something under his breath. Jasmine ignored him. She kept her eyes on the girl. "What's your name?" "Riley." "Well, Riley, I appreciate you being brave enough to speak now. That means something." Jasmine turned back toward the door. But Riley blurted out again, "Can I give you your food to go?" "It's done. It's already ready. I'll pay for it myself." Jasmine hesitated. That simple offer hit different. It wasn't just about food. It was about trying to undo something that had just happened in front of a dozen people, too afraid to speak up. She nodded slowly. "If you're sure." "I am." Riley darted to the back and returned with a brown paper bag folded at the top. She held it out like it was more than just a lunch order, like it was her own way of making peace. Jasmine took it gently, held her gaze a moment longer. "Thank you, Riley." She opened the door, the bell above it ringing softly as she stepped out into the sun. But instead of walking away, she turned and looked toward the side of the building. Something or someone had caught her eye. The side of the building was narrow, shaded by a crooked gutter and a rusted-out Coke machine that hadn't worked in years. Jasmine spotted the movement just beyond the edge of the building. Barely a glance. She paused, then stepped off the sidewalk and followed the path. Around the corner, that's where she saw her. Riley, the young waitress, was crouched on the back steps of the restaurant with her face in her hands. Her apron was balled up in her lap. She hadn't seen Jasmine, yet she was breathing hard, trying to keep her sobs quiet, the kind of cry that feels more like frustration than sadness. Jasmine didn't say anything right away. She just stood there for a moment, giving her space. When Riley finally looked up, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I didn't mean for you to see me like this." "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. Jasmine didn't push. She sat down on the step beside her, careful not to spill the to-go bags she was still holding. "You sure about that?" Riley looked away, wiped her face on her sleeve. "I've worked here since I was 17. I don't have a lot of options. My son starts kindergarten in 2 weeks. His shoes are too small, and I was going to use this week's tips to get him new ones. I can't afford to lose this job." Jasmine listened, not with pity, with attention. "I get it." "No," Riley said, shaking her head. "You don't. You have power. You can leave here and call a press conference. You have people who care what you say. I'm just some girl with rent due on the first." Jasmine let that sit for a second. "Riley, I didn't always have a microphone. I was a public defender for years. Before that, I was a broke college student who waited tables and ate cereal for dinner. I've had men talk down to me, tell me I wasn't allowed in the room, and cut my pay behind my back." Riley looked over, not quite believing her. "You?" she asked. Jasmine nodded. "Me. The only difference now is when they try it, more people are watching." The younger woman let out a shaky breath. "You shouldn't have to say sorry for how someone else acted," Jasmine said. "But you did, and that took guts. That matters more than 100 tweets from people pretending to care." Riley stared at the gravel beneath her feet. "I didn't know what to do. When he started talking to you like that, I felt sick." "You're not alone." They sat in silence for a moment. No speeches, no phone cameras. Just two women on a concrete step behind a greasy diner, talking like they'd known each other for years. Then Jasmine reached into her bag, not for her phone this time, but for a folded envelope. She held it out. "I want you to take this." Riley stared at it like it might be a trick. "What is it?" Help. Riley hesitated, but eventually took the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly. As she opened it, inside was a personal check and a handwritten note. Riley covered her mouth as her eyes scanned the page. "I know I can't take this. It's not charity," Jasmine said gently. "It's a chance. You said you don't have many options. This gives you a few more, enough to walk away from a place that doesn't respect you, enough to give your boy what he needs, maybe even enough to breathe for a minute." Tears welled up in Riley's eyes again. "But these weren't from shame." "Why me?" she whispered. "Because I saw you, and you reminded me of someone I used to be." Jasmine stood, brushing off her pants. "You don't owe me anything. But if you ever find yourself in a place where you can help someone else do it, that's how we build something better." Riley nodded slowly, still gripping the envelope. Jasmine gave her one last look, then turned back toward her car. No press, no audience, just a quiet act behind a small diner in Sulphur Springs. But the moment didn't stay private for long. By the time Jasmine reached her car, her driver had already stepped out and opened the door, but she didn't get in right away. She stood for a moment, gazing back at the diner, like she was trying to burn the whole experience in a memory, not the embarrassment or the disrespect, but the small moment of grace she'd just shared with a stranger. Behind the building, she didn't say a word to her driver, just handed him the food bag, climbed in, and asked him to drive to the next stop, some community center 30 miles out. On the ride, she scrolled through her phone, quietly rewatching the short video she'd recorded inside Norma's table. Her voice was calm, steady. She hadn't realized how powerful it sounded until she saw it through someone else's lens. She posted it with a short caption: "Asked to leave a restaurant today for simply existing. Not the first time, probably won't be the last. Here's what happened." And that was it. No hashtags, no tagging, just the moment, raw and real. She set the phone down, no expectation, no plan. But by the time she arrived at the community center, the video had been reposted over 3,000 times. People weren't just reacting to the injustice, they were struck by her composure, her clarity. And then slowly other videos started surfacing, footage from inside the diner, the brief back and forth with the manager, snippets of Riley handing Jasmine the to-go bag, a few blurry seconds of Jasmine walking around the side of the building. People wanted to know what happened after that. They didn't have to wait long. The next morning, Riley posted a photo on her personal Facebook page. It showed her holding her son's tiny backpack, standing on her porch, smiling through tears. She wrote, "Yesterday, I met someone I'll never forget. I watched her get kicked out of my workplace for being who she is. I didn't speak up at first. I was scared, but she still treated me with more kindness than I deserved. She gave me a way out, and now I'm taking it. I quit today, and I'm enrolling in community college next month. My son's gonna see his mama do better." The post exploded. People across the country began commenting, not just with encouragement, but with offers: childcare scholarships, a laptop. Someone from a local nonprofit in Dallas said they'd cover her tuition for the next 2 semesters. Another woman offered to mail new shoes for Riley's son, and still Jasmine hadn't said a word. Since posting the video, she could have gone on the news, she could have held a press conference. She didn't. She just let the moment live where it belonged, in the hands of people who felt it. Meanwhile, things got complicated for the diner. Norman's table wasn't ready for the wave that hit them. The restaurant's Yelp page was flooded with angry reviews. Local media caught wind and parked outside for hours, hoping to get a comment from the manager. He refused. Eventually, Norma herself, a silver-haired woman in her 70s, issued a brief statement. She said the manager was her nephew, that she was deeply sorry for what happened, and that the diner would be reviewing its policies. But Jasmine didn't take a victory lap. When a journalist asked her if she wanted the place shut down, she said, "I don't want retribution, I want reflection." That was it. The comment got quoted everywhere. It was exactly the kind of line that landed in headlines. But for her, it wasn't a punchline, it was a truth, because Jasmine knew what it meant to be reduced to an image, to be hated by people who never shook your hand, never heard your voice, never saw your work. She also knew that grace was louder than anger if you let it speak long enough. And back in Sulphur Springs, as the chaos settled, one thing became clear: Riley's life had changed, not because of politics, not because of fame, but because someone saw her when no one else did. But there was still one more twist to come. By Friday morning, Jasmine's name was trending in 3 states, but the story that caught fire wasn't about her being kicked out. That was just the spark. What made it spread like wildfire was everything that happened after the waitress, the envelope, the quiet moment on the back steps. No big speeches, no press briefs, just raw human truth. The video Riley posted about quitting her job was picked up by national outlets. Morning news anchors debated whether Jasmine had handled it gracefully or strategically, but the public didn't care about sound bites. They saw something that felt real, the kind of moment people rarely get to witness, especially involving politicians. And then came the bigger ripple. A local teacher named Miss Terrell in Commerce, Texas, posted a message on Twitter. One of my former students, Riley, just stood up and walked out of the job that's been draining her for 3 years. I watched her hustle through high school. While raising a newborn, she was always stronger than she gave herself credit for. Now she finally sees it too. Thank you, Jasmine Crockett. Within hours, Riley had an inbox full of messages from people offering jobs. Some were from nonprofits, others from restaurant owners who wanted to hire her not as a waitress, but in management training. Even a community college in Tyler invited her to speak to incoming students. Meanwhile, Jasmine remained quiet. She hadn't tweeted anything else, hadn't gone on any talk shows, until a reporter from a small newspaper in East Texas, the Wood County Sentinel, managed to catch her outside a town hall meeting and asked the question that had been bouncing around online for days: why didn't you speak up more about what happened at the diner? Jasmine smiled softly. Because the point was never me. The point was how people respond when no one's watching. Riley didn't know any. You would hear her story. She still spoke up. That's the part that matters. The reporter published the quote in a short piece that ended up being shared more than any national article that week. And then came the part no one expected. On Monday morning, Riley posted a photo from inside a newly painted office, a desk, a computer, a corkboard already half full with class schedules and sticky notes. Her caption was simple: first day working at Hopeth, a nonprofit that helps single moms restart their careers. Jasmine connected me with them last week. This is just the beginning. People didn't just comment. They got emotional. Men and women from across the country wrote about being moved by the courage it took for a young mother to walk away from what she knew, even when it was all she had. In Dallas, a local women's organization launched a scholarship fund in Riley's name. By the end of the week, they'd raised over $18,000, and still Jasmine kept her spotlight dim. When a national outlet requested a sit-down interview, her team responded with a short note. She appreciates the interest, but respectfully declined. She believes the story told itself didn't sit well with every pundit. Some accused her of using the moment for clout, even though she hadn't asked for a dime of credit. Others twisted the story into a culture war talking point. But those voices got quieter as the public response grew louder and kinder. It wasn't just about a congresswoman or a diner anymore. It was about people remembering what it looks like when dignity meets decency. And in the background of it all, Riley's life was changing in small but meaningful ways. Her son got his new shoes, her fridge stayed full. She bought a used car that didn't stall at red lights, and every now and then she'd look at that envelope still folded up in her nightstand and remember what it felt like to be seen. But Jasmine hadn't said her final word, not yet. 3 weeks passed by now. The national buzz had quieted. A new scandal had taken over headlines. Some celebrity drama was on every screen, and most people had moved on. But in Sulphur Springs, something was still unfolding quietly, steadily. Riley had settled into her new job at Hope Path. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. She managed intake forms, organized supply drives, and helped other women like her figure out how to rebuild. For the first time in years, she didn't wake up dreading the day ahead. She had a desk, a drawer with her name on it, and a tiny space heater she bought herself with her second paycheck. Her son Kyle started kindergarten with a lunchbox full of snacks and sneakers that lit up when he ran. Riley still walked him to the bus stop every morning, and every evening they practiced sight words at the kitchen table. She had no idea that Jasmine was still keeping tabs on her from afar. It wasn't until a letter arrived at Hope Path that Riley found out it was addressed to her by name, written in clean black ink inside a single sheet of stationery, and a photo. The photo showed Jasmine standing outside a small brick building with a hand-painted sign, Crockett Learning Center, opening spring 2026. The note was handwritten: Riley, you reminded me why I do this. This center is for women like you. It'll offer free childcare, job placement services, and community education in small towns across Texas. You're not just the reason I stayed calm in that moment. You're the reason I decided to make this permanent. You helped spark this. Stay steady, stay proud, Jasmine. Riley read it 3 times before setting it down. Then she cried quietly, the kind that doesn't ache, just let something out that's been held in too long. She never posted about it. She didn't think she had to, but word spread anyway. Someone from Jasmine's staff confirmed the learning center was already under construction. In Navarro County, funded partly by private donations and partly from a new education initiative Jasmine had been quietly pushing through Congress, it was built for women with limited access, mothers in rural areas, people stuck in jobs they couldn't leave, the invisible workers who held entire towns together without anyone noticing. The same kind of woman Riley had been. That's when Jasmine finally spoke publicly again. She gave a short speech at a town hall in Denton, nothing flashy, just a few words, to a crowd of about 60 people. But someone recorded it from the back row, and that clip made its way online by nightfall. In it, she said, "What happened at that diner didn't make me angry. Not really. What stuck with me was how quickly someone tried to make me small, and how someone else, someone with way more to lose, decided to do the opposite." Riley didn't have power, but she had courage. That matters more so. No, I didn't want to turn it into a media moment. I wanted to turn it into something real. That clip didn't trend like the first one had, but the people who saw it really saw it. Didn't forget it, and neither did Riley. She kept Jasmine's note folded in the back of her journal. Some days when the work felt heavy or she doubted herself, she'd open it again and read those words, "You helped spark this." She didn't see herself as a symbol. She still hated being in the spotlight. But now, when a young woman walked in a hope path with a tired face and 2 kids hanging off her hips, Riley could say, without blinking, "I've been there too," because she knew the ache of staying quiet. She also knew the power of finally speaking up. And maybe that was the greatest part of it all, not that someone powerful helped her, but that she realized her voice had always mattered even before the world started listening. And maybe, just maybe, that's how real change begins. It would have been easy for Jasmine to move on in her world. Moments like the one at Norma's table happen more often than people realize. Disrespect in quiet tones, power plays behind a smile, subtle digs wrapped in false courtesy. Sometimes they were shouted, sometimes whispered, but always they came with the same message: "You don't belong here." But that afternoon in Sulphur Springs didn't vanish from Jasmine's mind, not because it was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. It wasn't, not even close. It stayed with her because of Riley, because of what happened when no cameras were around, because of the reminder that power wasn't always about volume, it was about choices. A few months later, Jasmine spoke at a university in San Marcos. The room was filled with students, some eager, some skeptical. The moderator asked her to reflect on what happened that day at the diner, and why she never made a bigger media moment out of it. She answered slowly, "Because not everything needs a spotlight to matter. Some stories change lives in silence." Then she paused and looked around the room. People ask what I did next, but the better question is what she did next. Riley walked out of that job with no savings and no guarantees. She still showed up for herself, and now every woman who walks into that learning center will feel the weight of her courage, even if they never know her name. A hand went up in the audience. A student, quiet voice, unsure, asked, "Do you think it made a real difference?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Absolutely not, because it changed the world overnight, but because it changed her world. And once you change one, you never know how far that echo travels." The room went still for a moment, and then came the questions, not about policies, not about elections, but about decency, about what it looks like to do something kind when nobody's watching, about the moments that don't go viral. Back in Sulphur Springs, Norm's table stayed open, but different. The manager who asked Jasmine to leave quietly stepped down a month after the story broke. No statement, no goodbye post. Norma herself took over day-to-day operations, and for the first time in years, she changed the menu, added new items, hired a new staff. The restaurant slowly earned back the trust of the community, not through grand apologies, but through consistency, respect, and small things done right. As for Jasmine, she never returned to that diner. She didn't need to. The real story didn't end there. It lived on in the learning center, in Riley's new job, in a little boy who no longer went to bed hearing his mother cry in the next room, in quiet choices that spoke louder than any microphone. And for everyone watching, those who cheered, those who doubted, it offered something worth holding on to, a lesson that grace isn't weakness, that standing tall doesn't always mean shouting, that real power lives in how you treat people when the world's not looking. If you're still watching this video, maybe you've been Riley, maybe you've been Jasmine, maybe you've even been the person behind the counter who stayed silent too long. But wherever you are in that story, there's still time to make a better choice. You don't need a title to change someone's day. You don't need a platform to lift someone else up. And if this story reminded you of something true, something you believe in, don't let it stop here. If you think stories like this matter, take a second to subscribe, because the world doesn't need louder voices, it needs better ones. Sometimes, the biggest changes begin with the smallest moments: a glance, an apology, a quiet act of courage. The story you just read isn't just about politics or someone famous being mistreated. It's a reminder that real power lies in how we treat each other when no one is watching. No matter who you are, someone who stayed silent, someone who's been overlooked, or someone who stood up for what's right, this story is for you. You don't need a title to do what's right. You don't need influence to change a life. Be kind, especially when you can. And you can always choose kindness. If you've ever felt like your actions were too small to matter, remember Riley. She had nothing but courage. And her quiet choice sparked a wave of change that still echoes. Be the one who chooses kindness in a quiet room. Be the one who speaks up when no one else will. Be the one who gives someone a chance when you have the power to do so. And if you're the one needing hope, here's your message. You still have time to become the person you want to be.